All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us during the Lytham Partners Investor Select Conference. My name is Robert Blum, managing partner of Lytham Partners, and during this fireside chat, we welcome Arianne Phosphate, ticker symbol of DAN on the TSXV and DRRSF on the OTCQB, and their president, Brian Ostroff. We're going to dive into questions in just a moment, but just a final item. I want to remind everyone that Brian is available for one-on-one meetings throughout the conference here. If you've not already signed up and would like to do so, you can send me an email at Blum, B-L-U-M, at lythampartners.com, or visit the website, lythampartners.com/virtual. You can click on the one-on-one meeting request button, and we'll look to get you taken care of. So, Brian, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a little while. It's great to see you.
Absolutely. Let's kind of start at the top. For those that may not be familiar with the company, let's go through a brief description.
Sure. So Arianne Phosphate, we are a developer of the Lytham phosphate deposit. So as your viewers may know, in the case of phosphate, most countries do not have enough. So North America, South America, Western Europe, lots of areas of Asia are importers of phosphate. And that phosphate predominantly comes from the Middle East and North Africa, as well Russia and China. So, obviously when it comes to security of supply, it could be a little bit of a question mark. So our asset is based in Quebec, actually not particularly far north. We're very fortunate. Most of our infrastructure that we require is already in place. We have a hydroelectric dam about 30 kilometers away, contracted for life of mine supply, very ESG friendly, using renewable energy, oversized haul roads, good population, the Saguenay River. So our infrastructure is well taken care of. The asset is absolutely world class. It is today the world's single largest greenfield deposit. We are capable of making an extremely high purity phosphate concentrate. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. And we have strong support in the community. We have collaboration agreement with the First Nations. The government of Quebec actually owns about 6%. We are a fully permitted, shovel-ready project. Most of the world's phosphate, I should also mention, and another place where Arianne has a big advantage. Most of the world's phosphate comes from sedimentary deposits, well over 90%. They are challenged because they have radioactive elements and heavy metals, and at the end of the day, obviously not ideal, but we do need phosphate. No phosphate means no fertilizer, means no food. Arianne does have an igneous deposit, so these are rare. There's maybe a dozen in the world. They don't have the same challenges with these deleterious elements. And at the end of the day, again, Arianne, no challenges with radioactive elements or heavy metals. So, quickly in summary, what is Arianne? Arianne's the world's largest. Arianne is the world's purest. Arianne is arguably the world's safest. We are fully permitted and shovel ready.
Lately, I've been hearing a lot about batteries and in particular LFPs. Maybe talk a little bit more about that and the relation to Arianne here.
Yeah, so the LFP battery is certainly one that is getting a lot of attention. So the LFP, lithium iron phosphate batteries, they have been around for a while, but technological advancements over the last few years have really started to propel them. And pretty much by the end of the decade, they are projected to be the most common of the lithium ion batteries. There's a lot of reasons for that. First of all, they're very safe. They don't go boom. I'm an old guy. I remember when you couldn't go on an airplane with certain makes of phones because of the lithium not being that stable. Weight to energy density, they can actually go through a lot more cycles, so they have a much longer life. They're more environmentally friendly, like the materials in terms of mining, cobalt, nickels. Some of these other battery materials are a little bit more challenging, harder to get. And one last thing of interest is when you look at the various battery chemistries out there, the LFP actually requires less lithium. And so as lithium prices move higher and there's more concerns around securing it, there's tends to be a bit of an advantage, of course, to look at the LFP. Now, with that, we all know many car companies have gone the way of the LFP. Tesla, Volkswagen, Hyundai, Ford and GM are looking that way, and it's gotten a lot of attention. Of course, these are big companies, and certainly in the case of Tesla, everyone wants to know what Tesla is doing. But I think that what people don't recognize is, as much as the cars are an exciting and growing market, it really is more about energy storage. So the LFP battery is really even more ideal for energy storage. So what is that? If you have solar panels on your roof, or even things like wind, or any source of renewable energy where you're capturing, it's great to capture it, but you need to store it so that you can use it when you need it, and the sun might not be shining and the wind might not be blowing. And so that's really where the LFP is going to be a real major factor. And so much so, and a lot of people, again, don't recognize this, but by 2027, 2028, the belief is that you will have more LFPs in energy storage than you will have in automotive. And so, what that means is these growth curves are going to be big. I know there's a lot of talk, and I think that we will meet or surpass what people's assumptions are in terms of the growth of that market. But, I think that what is important to understand is phosphate, just in and of itself, demand grows every single year, roughly 1.5% to 2% a year. And that was before the battery. And so now you start to look at these, battery demands and what that might mean. And you can easily see a doubling, a tripling, possibly even a quadrupling of annual demand for phosphate. And so, as everyone understands, 2% on 2% on 2% a few years out is nice growth. But if all of a sudden you're looking at 5% on 5% on 5% going out a few years, that is a big deal. And so at the end of the day, people recognize things like lithium, like cobalt, like nickel, like graphite, and they recognize them as a critical material. But I don't think people have yet come to the realization that phosphate is every bit the critical material. And if you're going to have batteries, you're going to need phosphate.
So you sort of expand. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious what this means for Arianne, but in relation to what you've done sort of historically, or what you've sort of thought about historically as it relates to food supply and things of that nature, does this mean that there's sort of a pivot taking place, or kind of expand on that if you could?
Yeah. Okay. So, first and foremost, what does all of this mean for Arianne? And first and foremost, the world is short phosphate, period. And we need more because demand grows. And Arianne has it. And, again, within the battery sphere, not just any phosphate is going to do. As I talked about earlier, there are different types of phosphate deposits. All of them are different. They are challenging. And if you're going to approach the battery market, for example, you need a very pure phosphate to make a pure phosphoric acid. And the less pure that phosphate is, the more you're reliant on the technology of being able to filter and purify that phosphoric acid. And so our phosphate works extremely well. And in fact, about 6-7 months ago, we did release some news. And we have confirmed, we've done a bunch of tests. We've worked with some battery companies, and Arianne's phosphate absolutely will work in the batteries. So, your question, what does that mean for Arianne? And is the company pivoting? It's funny you should ask that, because I'm asked that quite a bit. And in fact, some people have even kind of seen it as a bit of a knock against the company. Oh, they're pivoting. Oh, they're pivoting. And, I actually appreciate the question, because I think people need to understand that is a big misconception. So, people look at Arianne, they say, oh, they're just a fertilizer company. They're not a battery company. Oh, now they're going after the battery world, but they're a fert guy. And nothing has changed for us. We are developing a phosphate mine. We are a phosphate company. That hasn't changed. It's not going to change. We are a phosphate company. What has changed is that the use for phosphate has expanded, and in particular, our phosphate. So I'd almost argue that it's not Arianne that's pivoted, it's the industry that has pivoted. There are more uses. And the example that I would give is, let's say I'm a platinum miner, and my platinum is being used by GM in their catalytic converters. One day, Tiffany's calls me because they want to put out a line of platinum jewelry. Well, have I pivoted? Have I changed? Is the company any different? No, it's just a wider spectrum of potential customers. So, at the end of the day, what has changed is my potential consumer base. But we are still just a maker, developer of a phosphate mine. And the guys who deal with us, our consumers, our off-takers, our partners, they're going to use that phosphate for what they want to use it for. It just so happens that batteries now are becoming an important driver. And we now are talking with battery companies as well as fertilizer companies.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Let's sort of transition a little bit. There's been a lot of talk from governments recently regarding the pursuit of legislation to secure critical materials. Maybe sort of just expand on those sort of talks and discussions that are taking place out there.
Yeah. So look, one of the things that really started with COVID is we've come to realize that maybe our supply chains aren't quite as robust and secure as maybe we had thought. And this has become a big deal. There are a lot of people that believe, for example, half of the inflation problem has really been around logistics and supply chains. And so, it has caused a big think, I think, amongst companies and governments and reassessing, everyone looking at their supply chains. And unfortunately, what we've also seen is from a geopolitical point of view, things have become a lot more strained. I mean, over the last few years, the world's become little bit more dangerous. We see what's going on in Ukraine. There are greater concerns maybe with regards to China. And in talking about China, a lot of conversation happens around the critical materials, the battery materials. And, China has access to, and they've spent a couple of decades building those supply chains, exploiting their resources, and they are dominant in some of these materials. Now, when it comes to the LFP, China is about 90% of the LFP market right now. So, you want to talk cars, and Tesla's dominant, and Volkswagen and Ford. Yeah, they are the major players in the automotive market, but they are reliant on Chinese LFP batteries. And so I think given the heightened tensions and that Western governments, have really chosen to focus on it and see what can be done to address that. So in the United States, the Biden administration, there has been a lot of conversation around their Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. And in the IRA, it has provided for significant financial incentives for electric vehicles, batteries, provided that those materials are made in the US, and that they are made from materials that come from either the United States or friendly countries with the United States, countries that have free trade agreement, etc. And it is a fair amount of money that's being thrown at that space. But there's also, and not talked about as much, as the Defense Production Act, DPA, in particular Title III. And that has basically provided for a fair amount of funding to the Department of Defense to also secure critical materials that are viewed as necessary for the military, for the interests of the United States, and in particular in the DPA is Title III, where it cites specifically, the projects, the materials to be supported can only be in the United States or Canada. Now, here in Canada as well, there is a big critical minerals initiative, funding being provided for projects that can help with that. And in the United States, recently, there's actually $195 million set aside for a global producer of a purified phosphoric acid to set up an LFP plant in the United States. So, we are definitely seeing, the government's getting involved to help spur activity, to help secure these supplies of necessary ingredients. And look, phosphate, it's important because without phosphate, you're not going to eat. But now beyond that, phosphate is starting to maybe become understood as a critical mineral.
Got it. Again, let's transition one more time because I think we've only got a couple of minutes left here. You've recently made an announcement around some changes and some additions to the board. Let's sort of go into some details there as well, if we could.
Yeah, something that I'm very excited about. I think investors should be excited about it as well. So first, we've moved Marco Gagnon to chairman of the board of Arianne. So I've known Marco for a long time. For some of the people who are in attendance here today, they might know my background. I was an early partner a mining fund that focused on small caps, and so I've known Marco from his days over at Adventure Gold. So Marco is really a great guy. He's a geologist. He's well known. He has a good following. He started his career with large mining companies, but really gravitated more towards the smaller companies where he could really focus on his skills. He's sat on the board of Arianne for some time, so he's actually watched this project grow up. And again, he comes at it really with the understanding of smaller companies, developing assets, having to deal with some of the challenges of being the small guy in the room. So he's going to be great as chairman. And then in terms of addition, we announced a fellow by the name of Rafe Sully to our board. And, Rafe's a pretty great addition for us. So those who don't know, Rafe was ex-Nutrien, and Nutrien is among the world's largest fertilizer companies, possibly even the largest, but certainly amongst the largest. And there he was executive vice president of Nutrien, but he was also the CEO of their phosphate and nitrogen divisions. And so aside from being big players in fertilizer, Nutrien is also a major player in purified phosphoric acid. In fact, certainly in North America, they are the largest. They are amongst the largest in the world. And purified phosphoric acid is the material that is going to go into batteries, and it's used in other applications like food and animal feeds. But this was Rafe's space. He'd been with Nutrien and Potash Corp, which was Nutrien's predecessor. So he comes to us, obviously very well connected, knows the phosphate space extremely well. He's lived it. And so that's a great addition, but also previous to his roles in the fertilizer Nutrien world, he was ex-Bain and Company. And so he also comes with, certainly a high level of financial acuity. So, Rafe was obviously aware of Arianne. I think most industry guys are aware of us, and he too has watched this project grow up. And at the end of the day, I think he's pretty excited about our prospects, and he understands that our phosphate's going to be needed. And when you look particularly at growth in industrial uses, batteries and what have you, I think he sees big opportunities. And he comes again with a knowledge of that. And so, look, I think that investors really should understand something here, which is, here is third-party validation, right? I've been with the company. Okay, yeah, Brian likes Arianne. I but here is someone who is, arguably within the top handful of people in terms of knowledge and the whole ecosystem of phosphate. And here he is. So he joined as November, he joined as advisor in late November or early December. And, now he's agreed to join the board. And I think that says a lot. And also, look, as you know, insiders, they have to file in terms of share ownership and what have you. And in a pretty short period of time, if your viewers go and take a look, they'll see that he's bought 1.3 million shares. So, look, I think that says more than I could ever say.
That's probably a good transition to the last sort of topic here. This is an investor conference. maybe just chat a little bit about kind of how you see this valuations, metrics in the industry, et cetera, and how it relates to Arianne.
Yeah. So look, here's a big shocker. I don't think you'll find too many managements that don't think their stock is unjustifiably cheap. But you know what? I think our stock is just ridiculously cheap in terms of valuation. Today we are roughly a $50 million US market cap. This project, it takes a long time for projects to advance. This has been a little over 10 years, and it's cost about $100 million Canadian to get to where we are today. And so, an investor today is able to come in at a valuation of, less than what the company had to spend to even get to where we are. And look, again, by way of background, very versed in small mining ventures, spent a lot of my life doing that. And I can tell you that over 90% of companies out there don't get to this place. They are unable to find a proper ore body. The metallurgy doesn't hold up. The economics don't hold up. The environmental pushback is too much. And somewhere along the line, they don't make it. And Arianne is one of the few that have, and going back to $50 million US market cap, you're talking about a project today that in production will gross profit at today's phosphate price somewhere around $600 million a year. And so, we traded 5%, under 5% really of our NPV. And that's for a fully baked, permitted, best of class. And so now let's talk briefly about the product. And as we've said, phosphate equals fertilizer equals food. That's not going to change. Nothing's going to change with that. You've got all the downside protection of a product that will always be needed, but the upside. So again, people recognize lithium, cobalt, and graphite, and nickel, and they've all done extremely well. You think about it, 15, 20 years ago, people weren't thinking about lithium. What was lithium? It was used in pharmaceuticals or aerospace or all this fringe stuff. And today, now everybody knows lithium, and prices have skyrocketed, and people have done extremely well investing in the space. And there's no shortage of lithium companies out there that today have market caps, many hundreds of millions of dollars, $1 billion. And, those projects are still early days. They're still drilling. They're still doing the metallurgy. They have to get the permits. They have to do the offtakes. And so I know this process takes years. And so there will absolutely be big winners in the battery materials and the lithiums and the cobalts and what have you. But there are going to be a lot of losers, because a lot of deposits just aren't going to be what they were thought, or they couldn't get the permits, or it took them too long, and someone else came and got the market. And so phosphate is starting to become understood as a critical material. And as that happens, I think the very few phosphate companies that are out there are going to get a re-rating. Again, we're a $50 million market cap with permits and vision, straight line to $600 million a year in gross profits. And there are companies out there in other battery materials that have billion-dollar market caps that are 10 years behind us. So, at the end of the day, if investors are out there and they're looking for something, critical materials, and maybe they were a little late to the space, phosphate and Arianne, world's biggest, purest, safest. So put me in the corner of managements that believe that their stock is a little undervalued.
Perfect, Brian. Let's we'll leave it right there. I think you may be the only one. There may be one or two others. Thank you so much for the time today. Greatly appreciate it. If anyone else out there has not already signed up for a one-on-one meeting, would like to do so, again, reach out to me, Blum, BLUM at lythampartners.com. Again, visit the website, lythampartners.com/virtual. Click on the one-on-one meeting request button. We'll look to get you taken care of. We hope everyone enjoys the conference. Brian, thank you again very much for the time today. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for the time. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.